We were talking about the paranormal and just kind of
to a place that she shouldn't have.
Well, it was the ectoplasm thing that caused this.
It was the cheesecloth ectoplasm.
I don't know. These Netflix subscriptions are getting a little bit too
there's
out there.
a Netflix series on the paranormal and mediums that I started watching last night, and I was
recounting it,
but yet horrified. And just watch it and just kind of laugh. Actually, if you'd laugh harder if you'd heard what Kathy said about it.
I didn't mean to say it. I thought you were just taking it in a really strange direction.
No, you took it in a weird direction. That was all you on that one. Zip ties and all.
It was a zip tie reference.
Zip ties on a chair.
Yeah. All I can think of was Leonard Cohen, but yeah. Okay.
I just like you happen to have cheesecloth on you too.
Yeah.
For the ectoplasm. Look that up. Ectoplasm, paranormal, back in the day.
Cheesecloth.
You'll find some really great pictures of that.
You've already done the research?
Oh, they show it on the series. All these people like in chairs, with their cheesecloth around their ankles and their wrists, and the ectoplasm coming up, but it's cheesecloth.
Smith writing, where they're just like looking into the distance.
Seeing what we could not see. Channeling what we cannot channel.
Yeah.
There's
Amy, are you ready to count us in?
No, let's wait one more minute. I'm sure everybody really wants to hear us keep talking about this. So another thing about it, no, just okay. Maybe there's a little moment where, okay, all right. If somebody comes in, you guys
I'll let them in. I'll let them in.
You're in charge. I've got a lot of
dance collective ready, choir ready.
Oh.
Backup singers, percussion.
Oh. Let's see.
I think we need dancers too.
Well, it's the end of the week.
We have dancers.
Where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
Well, hello everyone. It's Friday, Feedback Friday, that is. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me is Amy Dufault from Cape Cod. And this is Feedback Friday, episode 109. Oh my God. We are almost the oldest show on oldest living show on earth, right? Well, Feedback Friday is our show where we meet with artists, scholars, creatives, dancers, historians, activists, and all to speak about our favorite topic, which is natural dyes and color. And we're really happy you're joining us. And I just have a few reminders and then some housekeeping, and then we're going to go into today's format, which I'll talk about as well. So we have a holiday market going on at botanicalcolors.com, and some limited items, including indigo dyed scarves and beanies. The beanies are climate beneficial wool from the Fiber Shed organization and affiliates in Northern California and beyond, kind of Western US. And then the scarves are from Threads of Life in Indonesia, and they're beautiful. They're hand spun, hand woven cotton, and they dye beautifully. So those are on the site. We also have a clearance on our hand-woven vintage hemp fabric, so check that out. And what else? Oh, we had our second wholesale meeting yesterday where I had to do magic tricks, and so that was kind of fun. Met with a bunch of really interesting folks and talked about pH, which is one of my favorite topics. So that was a lot of interesting discussion. Okay, Amy's going to be the moderator for this presentation. She'll be monitoring chat, which currently is turned off, and we'll open that back on, back up at the end of the presentations and discussion. And as well, at the end of the presentations, we will unmute for hellos and just to welcome everybody, at least to say hi to everybody at the end. So today we welcome Feedback Friday alumna Rosalind Wyatt and Christi Johnson. If you've been following Feedback Friday, you've seen both of these amazing artists before. And we're really, really thrilled that they're able to join us in actually a dialogue about what they do and all the interesting things about it. Rosalind works in the intersection of breath, calligraphy, and cloth, and literally stitches language and sound into her work. Christi reveals the intention in the combination of the conscious and subconscious and celebrates it with image, color, and imbued talismans. The two will discuss the importance of getting centered with hand stitching, the power of embellishment, and the history of why we stitch and dye. Though this is a different format of a Feedback Friday, typically we have a single presenter, I think you're going to find that this is going to be fascinating. It's the first of a couple of mini conversations that we have scheduled, and so we're really excited to welcome both of you. Christi and Rosalind, we're so pleased that you can join us. Thank you so much. And please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here. Really great to be here.
Christi, did you want to start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So I can go ahead, and I want to talk about sort of the process of work. For me, I don't necessarily consider myself like a process artist, but I do consider the process of making the work is part of it. It is an internal and external processing for me. So as you'll see on the slides that I show, I definitely start with a very specific intention and image in mind. And I allow the process of creating the artwork to also be sort of an internal processing of whatever I'm going through at the time. So the pieces that I'm sharing today are 3 pieces that I've created over the past 10 years or so, that are these sort of, that have been at these pivotal points in my life, or these pivotal sort of life changes. So I'm going to just jump into the slideshow. So this first one, I've just put this was a little scrap. I just wanted to sort of share this tiny little scrap that sort of kicked off the next piece that I'm going to show, because I think it's important to share, like, you know, sometimes when we have these larger ideas in mind, it's always really helpful to make a tiny little piece first and see how that worked before we jump into a giant cape. So this is a capelet. I don't exactly, I think I made this in 2015. I don't remember if I had a name for it. But this was basically intended to be like a heart healing piece. And it was 120 something small pieces of individually hand dyed pieces of raw silk. This was not hand stitched. This was stitched by machine, but this was sort of like one of my earlier pieces I felt important to share in like the processing of emotion through pieces. So I was living in New York City, and I was going through a really bad breakup. And felt very much out of place because I had only been living in the city for about a year. felt out of place in my relationship, felt out of place in the place that I was living. And so this was a way for me to find healing through different plants and through the actual process of putting all of these little tiny pieces back together. So this is where this piece started. And I don't, even at this point, I don't even know what this labeling system is, 1A, 2A, 2C, 2D, 1B, but I had labeled them all, created this pattern and individually hand dyed them, which you can, there's a little close up of these pieces, and each one would be dyed. Some of them had different colors down the edges. And this was, the plants that I used in here were specifically, a lot of them were medicinally used for sort of uplifting the heart, like for hibiscus was one of them. There's some St. John's wort in there. I can't remember all the other dyes that I used because like I said, it was 2015. Madder root is traditionally sort of associated with coming of age ceremonies, and that felt sort of somewhat important in this. So this is how that piece sort of came about. And through the, there's elderberry down here, which is, you know, healing from or trying to support your immune system. And here's the final piece hanging. I had intended it to be a wall piece at first and ended up feeling much more appropriate to have it actually be a garment that would go on somebody. So I slit a hole in the middle of the wall piece. So you can see, if we look at this, we can see that that would have been how this wall piece was hung. And so I just cut a hole right there, horizontally there. And it became like a cape, like this cape of healing, this cape of warmth and sunshine. I think it was probably around March and April. So that was especially needed as we moved into the spring months of that year. It's just sort of a little embrace in fabric. This next one I called, I think this one was called A Journey Through 1,000 Lives or something like that. And this, I love this piece because it was an inclusion, it was an inclusion of all of these different fabrics that I had collected over the years, different little scraps of things. Like this was, you know, some of my sister's, the fabric my sister dyed that she wasn't using for things. My sister also works with dye. She does like tie-dye with fiber reactive dyes, but we definitely grew up in a tie-dyed household. So, so that is a beloved part of us. And then these are from a friend Jenny had given me from San Francisco, this scrap here. And so all of these scraps all of a sudden had started to indicate different parts of my life. This was sequins from a place that I had worked at right out of college. And most of these fabrics towards the middle are all naturally dyed. Raw silks, cotton that I had used for different workshops, and just generally collected from different stages of my life. Here's a close-up of that sequin piece. And this piece was really pivotal for me because I wanted to start working with painting again. So it's a combination of these art forms that I was very familiar with, the hand stitching, these hand beading, and then painting was something that I had done a lot when I was in high school. I went to a Magnets Arts High School, and so I did a lot of painting, and it never felt like it was something that I was all that good at necessarily, or that I was that it didn't feel like it belonged to me. And yet when I started working on this piece, it felt as though I was coming home to something. Like it felt as though painting was this home away from home. And so working with, here's a picture of me actually painting this piece. So working with this combination of these naturally dyed pieces and these different pieces from all throughout my life, and then also returning to the painting that had been such an integral part of my creative process for so long, really allowed me to process like why I felt like painting didn't belong to me, or why I didn't feel like painting was something that was really that I was really connected to. Yet when I held a paintbrush, it felt like a second nature to me. I just love these little collage shots of the process of creating this piece that I included here. And here's in the background, you can see I've planned ahead. You know, I always plan my pieces ahead of time. But so here is a little bit closer of an image of that final piece, and the sort of the eye and the center of it being this sort of seeing through all of these different layers of this life, of these collected pieces of life, and kind of allowing them to layer on top of one another and allowing them to become like a larger story instead of all these disparate pieces. So yeah. And this third piece is something that I'm still working on. And this is sort of a transitional, once again, like one of these life transitions of like incorporating these different elements of life together. And this one's sort of an indication of like stepping into a role of motherhood. And so as of now, all I know of motherhood is my cat and my chickens, which I translated as a peacock because I thought the peacock would be prettier to stitch. And my cat got bright red in this one. And just working with this textile, which was given to me from an aunt of mine, that had been, you know, somebody, or assuming her grandmother or somebody in the past had hand stitched it. She's my aunt by marriage, not by blood. So we have different lineages, but she's also a very crafty aunt. So, and this piece is definitely, it continues to be a work in progress, but again, the process, I made this piece as intricate as possible because I wanted that complexity to be a part of it. I wanted that like figuring things out along the way to be a part of it. And each element of it was kind of me playing around with different stitches that were using stitches in new ways for me, like using this herringbone stitch up here, and also learning about the reality of working with 100-year-old linen fabrics, or I don't know, maybe it's only 50 years old, and it was kind of falling apart on me as I was working on it, which felt very, very reflective of a lot of things. So yeah, just playing around with how to use stitches in new ways and layering the stitches on top of one another and just allowing them to really crowd the space. So yeah, that's sort of, I think that's, oh, and then I wanted to share the back of it because I thought, I just love this shot of like the absolute mess on the back of it and throughout the process of creating this piece. Yeah, those are my slides.
Beautiful, your beautiful pictures, which I love. Okay, hold on. And we're gonna, I'm gonna share Rosalind's, some pictures from her, and then we'll have the two of you just talk a little bit about, I've got some questions for you guys, or if you want to say something about one of the other's images, and you know, we'll go organically with this one, but let's see.
Cool.
All right. Just want to make sure I have Miss Wyatt's in here. Oh, just a minute. I'm sorry, guys. Well, it doesn't matter.
Great, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Christy, for just sharing all of that. It's just so beautiful. So my I suppose coming to textiles was from a very young age. I grew up in a family, so my father was a filmmaker, and he's always been into poetry and philosophy, and my mother's sort of Italian Maltese, so it was this sort of Catholic and Jewish mix of like a lot of rich culture, I guess. And so from a very, well, from 4.5 actually, I was taught to write by my mum with a dip pen and ink and a calligraphy board, and that's how I learned to write. That's just so my mum, really. And apparently I loved the black ink, and I loved forming the letters. And then I went to school, and I remember kind of being horrified that not everyone was as patient as my mum, and that, you know, suddenly I was forced to do things I didn't really want to do and be things at certain times. And anyway, so but from a very young age was this forming of letters, and with the forming of letters, the inherent meaning behind narrative and the power of calligraphy. So I was always going to do art. In fact, I kind of dabbled with the idea of being an actress, but I was very formatively dissuaded from that by my dad, who said, look, honey, you'll spend most of your time out of work, which was probably right. So I kind of thought, hey, I'll be an artist instead. So I left school, and I sort of searched around for a degree, a sort of arts degree with meaning, really. and struggled and just kind of thought, I don't want to just go to college and be crammed full of ideas that don't really mean anything. So I was sort of in my early 20s, and someone said, do you know there's a degree in calligraphy and bookbinding? And so this little light bulb went off in my mind, and I went to visit this beautiful studios actually in Roehampton, which overlook sort of lovely sort of green pasture, which is quite unusual in London. And it was like walking into a scriptorium of people sitting at their desks, just quietly forming letters. And I thought, I didn't sort of really have to think much beyond that point. I just knew that I could spend 3 years of my life there. So I learned at that point, it felt like learning to write again, because you're having to form letters in a very historic way, in a very formal way, with a straight-edged nib. And you know, you have someone over your shoulder sort of marking your page with red and sort of saying, bad letter, good letter, bad letter, good letter. And this is how we learn, right? So after that, I sort of felt quite constricted by that, and sort of I felt like, oh, too many rules, you know, and like my artist self was throwing a bit of a wobbly, really. And so someone said, well, why don't you, I just started painting on textiles, why don't you look at a textile degree? And so I found this, well, I found a textile course at the Royal College of Art. Well, I had a portfolio of letters, of hand-drawn letters, and I kind of thought, okay, where would I fit into this postgraduate program at Royal College? And graphics wouldn't have me, sculpture wouldn't have me, illustration wouldn't have me, and the only place that would actually have me was textiles. So this first slide is a very early sample of me sort of transitioning from writing with a tool to writing with a needle, which is what I call it. Okay, next slide, please, Amy. And of course, then, you know, as soon as you start working with textiles and with text, then you have this whole other layer of story and this whole other possibility to bring in embellishment and layers of narrative. And sort of quite soon after I graduated, I started, thankfully, getting commissions. And this was one of the first commissions I got, I think. I've been at it quite a while. This man approached me and he said, look, I really want to give my wife something really special for our 25th wedding anniversary. And my first question is always, well, what's the text? What's the quote? And he gave me this beautiful piece of poetry from Anais Nin, which is something like, and the day came when the risk to remain found in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. So it's that tension between, you know, a bud forming to a bud opening. And for me, that's really significant in terms of, well, spirit really, and the growth of ourselves. And so this little emblem of a bud became an emblem of evolution. And so in the petals, which is all, by the way, it's all sort of, I use antique silk and vintage textile a lot, because I just find that it sort of elevates me to a sort of a higher sort of frequency, if you like. It means that the textile I'm using really has got a provenance, really has sort of comes with its own narrative. So within the little bud is the quote, and then there are 9 buds, all at different levels of opening along a long pashmina. And a bit like you, Christy, I create as I go along. The petals that you can see really was sort of triggered by a painting I had seen, a Mughal painting, beautiful miniature painting at the British Museum of a couple being married, and from the top of the painting were a pair of sort of big heaven-like hands with all these petals coming down, sort of like a blessing almost. And I just thought, that's got to go on the scarf. And so, you know, you have these ideas and then you think, oh, holy moly, how am I going to do that? Oh yeah, I've got to do it all by hand, and I've got to cut each letter, and then I've got to stitch each petal on, and la 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 la. But you have to do it, because it's like you're responding to a call, right? You're responding to you're being drawn along this creative process. And then also on the shawl are just tiny little gems, just to make it even more. It's like you want the recipient, the person who's commissioned it, to just like just have that moment of that you feel every time along. Okay, next slide. How are we doing time-wise? Yeah, 5 minutes. So then I guess my practice has just developed that way, from commission to commission, from me sort of diving deep into my artist self and sort of thinking, well, what would I like to do next? And it's always that that trajectory between satisfying myself as an artist and responding to the call of a commission, which I love. I love a commission. I love a brief. So this one came along. I mean, talk about life and art meeting. This was I have been going through a very difficult breakup, and it was sort of, I don't know, just after the pandemic, and I got approached by the Institute of Cancer Research, which is a sort of leading group of researchers here in the UK on the forefront of cancer research. And they said, we'd like you to tell the story of 12 cancer patients in their own words, and we'd like that to be told on one lab coat. And I just thought, oh boy, how on earth do you just tell that story, tell the story of death and disease, you know, in a sort of positive, in a positive way, which doesn't retract from the hard, thorny reality of basically children who are living and have died from the worst type of cancers. Anyway, here they are. Here are the amazing professors of from the Institute of Cancer Research, and each bit that you can see on that is either an individual story from a patient or their family, or the sort of red splodgy bits that you can see on Professor Chris Jones's blue lab coat are actually the cancer cells. Because I thought, I want to look at these cells. I want to look at what these researchers are looking at day in, day out. And I want to look them in the eye, and then I want to make them in textile, and I want to splash them on that coat. And I want that to be sort of almost like superhero, you know, these are the superheroes, because they are. These guys, what they're dealing with, what they're navigating through are my heroes, really. So that was last year. And then the last slide, please, Amy. So this is a current exhibition that again was commissioned beginning of 2019, and I got approached by United Arab Emirates, one of the Emirates, called Sharjah, and they're pretty special actually. So you've got Dubai, you've got Abu Dhabi, you've got Sharjah, and Sharjah, they love calligraphy. They live for calligraphy. They're very much steeped in their Islamic culture of calligraphy. And they invited me to create a body of work, an exhibit for a calligraphy biennale. And so I'm just going to actually finish by reading a sonnet, because this was my inspiration for this piece. And this picture is me signing the piece in the gallery, which is still there now. So this is the great bard, the great philosopher, William Shakespeare. How can my muse want subject to invent, while thou dost breathe, that pour'st into my verse thine own sweet argument, too excellent for every vulgar paper to rehearse? O give thyself the thanks, if aught in me worthy perusal stand against thy sight. For who's so dumb that cannot write to thee, when thou thyself dost give invention light? Be thou the 10th muse, 10 times more in worth than those old 9 which rhymers invocate. And he that calls on thee, let him bring forth eternal numbers to outlive long date. If my slight muse do please these curious days, the pain be mine, but thine shall be the praise. Finish.
I feel like we should have a moment of silence after that. We can do that. We can have a moment of silence. Just process that for a minute. Isn't it kind of interesting to be with 146 people just being quiet for a minute? It's pretty cool. So I wrote down a couple questions just listening to you. I have a lot of course, crossover, and that's why we picked you to be together too, because you're doing very similar things in different places and different styles of how you're doing it too. But some of the things that you guys have been saying over and over is this idea of, like you were just talking about, Rosalind, about responding to a call. And maybe you guys could talk about one after the other, just talk about that responding to a call when it comes to the textile itself, when you come across the textile and that inspiration to create from it.
Yeah, I mean, that really struck a chord with me hearing that, like that constant grappling between responding to a call and responding to a commission and sort of where the balance in that comes. And I think that is a lot of the times the balance of that I struggle with is like finishing a piece versus constantly having new pieces of fabric where I'm like, oh, what does this want to be? But yeah, I really think I also appreciate what you said about working with antique textiles, like these textiles that have a lot of history to them, and they feel very much like you're carrying something on. And I think that also those two combined, that sort of responding to a call and responding to a history in a piece can be really, really powerful and a really amazing driver of things that, you could have an idea in your head of what's going on, of how this piece is going to go. And then as you're working, there's this loud voice that just says, nope, do this. And you just go with it.
Yeah. And I think you have to, I don't know about you, but, there's a huge emotion that comes with antique textiles, I think. I mean, like I just, the other day, yesterday actually, I'm creating a sort of series of pashminas, and I sort of have a little archive. I'm sure you've got an amazing archive as well, Christy, but I've got this archive, and I pulled out this textile, and it was a piece of silk, hand dyed, hand woven ikat, with this sort of exquisite sort of zigzag over it. And I just put it down, and it was breathtaking. It was actually breathtaking. And I kind of at the time I kind of thought, I can't cut that, I can't, and so I grappled with keeping it in its original form, and there was even a rusty old pin in it, and I think this is the line we have to take as artists, as creators. It's like you have to do what's right for the moment and for the piece. And if that, in this case, I ended up cutting it, And I know this is where I almost fall out with textile curators, because they're like, we're not letting her anywhere close to our textiles, so it's like, oh, you could just cut into that. Because you have to, this is our job as creators. You have to fit the purpose to the cloth. You have to cut the cloth to the meter, and as long as I've always known that as long as you do that really respectfully and really kind of mindfully, you can do that. You can refashion it.
Yeah, I do. And I think about when I'm experiencing that, I think, well, first of all, the fact that I've considered, do I need to cut this? Do I, and the fact that I took that extra moment to sort of say, oh, I and this beautiful pin in this beautiful place, that marks this kind of moment in history. That's that appreciation right there, and that kind of respect for the process of creating. I feel like that feels, first of all, that feels like a kind of an homage. And then second of all, I could think about, if 100 years from now and I'm like dead and gone and somebody has one of my textiles in their hands and they're thinking that and they're about to cut it, I'm kind of like, go for it. Oh my God, like I'm gone. Like, it's okay. This, I want this piece to continue to existing, and I want it to exist, but, with somebody who appreciates it and someone who can respect the piece and somebody who can continue making art with it. I don't necessarily need it to be this like untouched piece in a museum. I think especially because the history of textiles are so, it's so verbal, and it's so non, I don't want to say non-existent because it definitely exists, but it's sort of like woven in between the lines. And so I think to learn the history of textiles, yes, it does help to have some, beautiful, exquisite pieces in museums, but also I think it's really important to also have pieces to handle and to look at exactly how that person has woven that piece, and start to, by taking that piece apart or repurposing it in some way, you learn a little bit more about the person that made that, and this person who maybe wasn't necessarily recognized in history in whatever way.
Yeah. And because it is such a haptic thing. I love that word, haptic.
Yeah.
When you're born, that's, you're kind of pushed out, aren't you? And it is sort of, it is visceral, it is real. And when we stitch, that is such a sort of a real thing as well, isn't it? The pull of the thread, the tension of the thread. Does this feel right? Is this flowing? And it's exact, and this is, I think, where all these sort of arts meet, really. It's when you're drawing, you know when you're really, just engaged with something and drawing it, and the line is flowing. And I feel that that's the intersection between, where the inspiration is, perhaps. Right, definitely. Do you make up any stitches when you stitch, Christi?
I do. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just to see what happens if I, kind of do this to here. I also like to obsessively handle antique textiles and try and figure out how they made that stitch. And sometimes in the process of trying to make somebody else's stitch, it's like, oh, okay, this is a totally different, I didn't get what they were going for, but I got something new that I know I can use in all these different ways. So what about yourself?
Yeah, well, I think the thing, sorry if I'm a bit blurry, by the way, guys, I don't know what's happening to the camera here, but I hope you can hear my voice anyway, if you can't see me clearly. But so I'm seeing that there's quite a few questions coming up about the stitch, the text. So
you guys want to jump into questions from everyone? There's a bunch of questions for you.
Yeah, I mean, let's go for it. But what I was going to say was the writing with the needle, which I think is sort of what we were getting to, talking about stitching, is, I've never pre-printed any of the text that I stitch. So I'll sort of have, a piece of writing here and the textile here, and I'll do it by eye. Because for me, that is the point. That's how I started as well. It was like I picked up this needle and I thought, can I write with this? The metaphor of the thread being the ink, and so I was discovering the stitches as I was forming the letters and seeing what was possible. And it was only afterwards that people kind of said, hey, can you come and teach us that? But I had to sort of flick through an encyclopedia of stitch and kind of think, oh, that's called couching and that. And still, I have no idea. I have no idea. It's just what feels right. You know, it's like the curve of the letter, you know, because for me, the handwriting of somebody is like, well, it's such a sort of, it's like a portrait of that person, a mind portrait, a heart portrait of that person. So you're going to take care to sort of just iterate that with thread and emulate that rhythm and that pressure and that vibrancy of line, even though it's time consuming, and you'll do what it takes to feel that connection.
Oh, I have an appreciation for that you just go into the writing, because as a person who always, anytime I'm writing on a piece of paper, I always end up with the words coming down. So I always have to fit everything to the page before I work on something, because otherwise, you know, the body is running off the side, or, you know, the imagery is always, I have my
yes,
concept
yes.
of space.
Yeah. And also when you stitch, it's slightly bigger than writing, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
So there's all those practical things, and like, thank goodness for tracing paper that you can just like place the where you want it, just simple things like that, you know.
Yeah.
How do they do that before then? I don't know.
All right, I'm going to throw a question in because it'll just kind of segue into from what you're talking about. I wonder if the artist can speak to what it's like to hear the call of content instead of constantly saying, oh, this would be pretty, this would be cool. So the call of the textiles that you're working with.
You know, I think of this phrase, or this idea that I read in a book where you know, the author was basically like, we sometimes as creatives, we have this idea that like we're just making something up. And he was like, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just making it up. If you feel like you're making it up, that's like totally accurate. You know, and his example is like Albert Einstein made up the theory of relativity. Marie Claire made up whatever, I don't know what, Marie Curie. Sorry, Marie Curie made up the important things that she did. You know, this idea that not only artists, but scientists, mathematicians, like anybody who is creating and inventing anything new in the world is making things up as they go along. And so I kind of, honestly, I don't necessarily differentiate between the call and like, oh, this would be pretty, or this would be cool. I kind of, they sort of come, they kind of blend into one another, where I allow it. I don't think of it as this mundane, as that mundane, like, oh, that's nice. Oh, you know, I'm like, okay, what I do tend to look at, okay, what about this and is interesting to me? Is it the way that they've used the colors? Is it the way that, you know, the way that the line work works, and kind of extract a little piece of that and draw it in my own sketchbook, at least when I'm dealing with like looking at inspiration out in the world, and kind of that way it gets translated into my own language. But yeah, that's sort of how I feel about it. I think they're kind of the same thing. I allow the mundane ideas to be just as special as the things that feel as though they're like channeled in.
Yeah, I'm thinking of just this notion of space, you know, creative space. I was lucky enough to spend a month in Japan, right at the sort of beginning of my calligraphy, it's part of my calligraphy training, really. And what's so extraordinary about Japanese culture is the care of detail in terms of preparing a space, preparing yourself to make a mark. Before you've even picked up the brush or thought about what you're going to write, it's like the sort of, and I recognize that is a bit like you say, you know, these mundane things that we have to do, like clearing, like you know, processing things, like listening, like all of these things. Really, it's like you need to be sort of ready for an idea, I think, to sort of land. And the emotional ground needs to be, yeah, you just need to be as empty as possible. I don't know how else to say that really, but so listening for a call or listening to the call, just wait, you know, just what's the hurry? That, you know, if you can really draw back from that sense of urgency of like, I mean, sure, we, you know, sometimes we have deadlines, we've got a million things going on in our lives, but it's okay just to take your time. And then conversely, not to hesitate as well. When you do get a little flicker of a flame, you know, then don't hesitate, just go for it, you know, just make the mark. And you'll know. So it's like this conversation we're having here, you know, question, response, listening, space, but it's all, there's a lot of space here.
Love you guys. Okay, both of your stories and inspirations are deeply touching. Love listening to you too. Where are the best places to collect old textiles and fabrics that have characters or stories? What are the best? Where do you find them? Oh,
People oftentimes people just give them to me at this point. People, you know, family members send them to me when people are cleaning things out, and that does require a certain amount of like, okay, I have to process this now because they sent me everything. Also, anytime, you know, any thrift stores, antique stores, anything like that, and just digging through the textiles. And then sometimes if I know that I'm looking for something very specific, you know, a very specific era or a very specific technique, I'll go to eBay and Etsy and just search for them. And that is, you know, sort of a wormhole. Like it could be like hours of searching for the thing that you're looking for. So yeah, those are my, honestly, at a certain point when people know that you're working with these textiles and with an appreciation, they just start sending them to you.
Yep, nothing to add. Exactly the same.
I think we were talking, well, it was, Christy, you have that really beautiful, that piece that you showed, it was that your aunts that had done all the stitching. But yeah, I recently I found this entire bag of my grandmother's stitching and stuff. But we so often, I think we all have these bags or boxes or these things that we don't want to, because a couple people have talked about, I don't want to cut into them. I don't want to change them. But you also want to celebrate them because they're sitting in a box. You have to do something with them. So this idea of celebrating the textiles, I think, is really important. So there's,
and I think,
oh, I'm sorry, keep going, Christy.
yeah, no, I think part of that too, what I realized is like when the people give you the stuff in the box, don't keep it in the box. I mean, as much as the box does preserve it, it's sort of like I'll a lot of the times I'll take those pieces and fold them. I'm just gonna grab it real quick. These are all a bunch of my embroidery, so it's not technically the same, but being able to see them all, you know, fold them like this so you can see all the pieces and quickly search through them. And so I have bins and bins and bins like this of these smaller pieces of textiles. That can be a really helpful way to make sure that you'll actually use them. It's when you can see them all and you don't have to dig through a box for them. Yeah.
Like making them more accessible.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
If I can't see it, it's not there. So
yeah. I know that's it's, I mean, sometimes you have so much that's there. You're like, oh my God, I have hoarded materials now. Oh my gosh, what am I, too much. It's time to start cutting and getting into them. Stop fooling around here. Got a question for you, Rosalind. Donna's asking, says, I find it very difficult to stitch text. What tools and thread size are you using for the smaller, longer text parts?
So there's no standard answer to that, I'm afraid. I wish there was. It's kind of what I'm saying about, you know, meat or trying to, I mean, for instance, this is a bit of my calligraphy here. So I would spend quite a long time, first of all, just looking at this. You know, looking at the size and the scale of the lettering, looking at the color of the ink of the lettering, looking at the interlinear space of it, as well as the mark itself. And then I would just decide, well, you know, do I you know, what is the textile? What's the purpose of the textile? You know, is it a gift for someone? You know, do I want it to sort of really replicate this look, as in sort of this is a sort of a grey mark on a cream vellum background. And then just I have again so many threads. For the very, very fine lettering, I use something called Purcell silk, which is, it's almost as thin as, oh, I've gone all blurry. Sorry about that. It's almost as thin as hair. And then I've got sort of things that you wouldn't typically use to stitch with, like crochet thread, rope even, polo thread. It just depends, you know. I think you just have to sort of find the right thing that will make the mark you want to make. Don't know if that helps.
That sounds good. And somebody else was asking too, if you're couching your text. It's so strange to see you blurred, but yet it's kind of cool too. I know.
I don't know what to do about that.
I think it refocuses if you don't move or something. I don't know. It's okay. We can still totally, we see your outline and we hear you. It's fine.
Okay, good. So am I couching? Yes, I'm couching a lot. I'm couching a lot, and I think the thing about text, if you're going to stitch some text, is keep your thread as loose as possible. Don't pull it. Try and respond to the thread, and don't manipulate it too much. You know, see what the thread wants to do. Break down your letters into series of marks, if you like. So if you think of, if you half close your eyes at a page of lettering, really what it is straight lines and circles. That's all that it is, and a lot of curves. So if you were to dissect a letter, you'd probably find that there's a straight part of the letter, there's a curly part of the letter, there's a horizontal part of the letter, there's a round part of the letter, there's an ascender, there's a descender, there's a circle, there's half a circle, there's a ball, so on and so on and so on. There's like a U shape, an N shape, and really that's all that lettering is. So if you can sort of do that mentally first, which is the easy part, and then sort of let your hands, let your fingers inform the stitch work or the embroidery. I mean, I imagine amongst us there's some consummate people who know exactly, you know, how to embroider every sort of magical stitch, but actually this is slightly different. You have to throw away the rule book for this, and you have to be very, very fluid in your approach to stitching. So I hope that helps.
Can you, it does, yes, I'm sure it does. That was a good, beautiful answer as always. Let's see. I wanted to ask you guys a question about the healing part of the fabrics that you use. And like Christy, you were talking about this cape of healing, an embrace in fabric, the scraps representing different parts of your life. And then of course, Rosalind, you have the Cancer Institute, the jackets, and that idea of that being also some type of an embrace from a jacket. Can you both talk about maybe how textiles can have this, I guess, embrace of healing, or I guess, yeah, we'll just say that, an embrace of healing.
Go ahead.
You want me to start? Or
If you want to start, yeah.
How do those doctors or those teachers feel, Rosalind, wearing those? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, okay. So the lab coat, I mean, everyone knows what a lab coat is, right? You know, they're made of heavy drill cotton. And the Institute of Cancer Research, they have different labs that are investigating different types of cancers, and they have color coded those, luckily for me, as an artist. So I think Professor Jones's lab, he wears a blue, all blue lab coat. And then Professor Huang, thank you, Professor Huang, whoever designed your lab coat, it's white, but it's got this quite sexy red collar. Okay. And I was like, and then there's just the standard white lab coat, and they've got their little logo here, right? And this was really, although I was commissioned to do one lab coat, our initial conversations were like, I want to know what you're wearing, what you're looking at, what your day looks like. It's like, sorry, but I'm just like a bit of a sort of investigator, a bit of a forensic investigator at the beginning of a commission, because you don't know what's going to trigger things. But there was something about, well, it was interesting actually, talking about healing. I read a lot of philosophy, and I was reading the Tao, actually. I was reading this beautiful translation, Stephen Mitchell translation of Book of the Tao. And, you know, there was one thing that kept coming out, and it was talking about three becoming one. And obviously the significance of three goes right across cultures, right across traditions, religions. And I was doing, so that was an idea in my mind. And I was aware of these three areas of research. And then I looked at the garments and I thought, well, why don't we sort of literally dissect the garments and reinvent them into three new garments? So take a sleeve off one of the blue lab coats and put it on the sleeve of one of the white lab coats, and, you know, take a label out and make that into a pocket. And so it's like, is that healing? I don't know, but it's somehow aligned with what they were going through as scientists of this rigorous, thorough, visual, sort of scientific approach to the study of those cells. And I don't know, that I tried to bring that into the very making process of deconstructing those garments and putting them back together. And then, of course, the words themselves is just like, you know, right at the heart of it, right at the heart of it. I don't know what you have to say, Christi, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as textiles or clothing being this sort of wrap, I think that similar to what we were saying earlier, the way that they carry the textiles sort of like carry on whatever their sort of history was before them. Like I think about when we have textiles from people who have passed on and they become these like really special, you know, this connective piece for us. So that's always been something that I found really important, like having, you know, clothing from people in my family who have passed and feeling still close to them. And also just having clothing from different eras of our lives too, where, you know, you pick up a piece of, you know, that cloth, that shirt that you had all through college or something, and it has this totally different, you know, you can almost like, it almost transports you back there. And I think because textiles are we are just surrounded by them at all times, unless you're in the shower, you are surrounded by textiles. It's very hard to get away from them. And so they become almost, we almost like, not necessarily take them for granted, but we almost forget that they're even there. And I think that's sort of something that becomes that ubiquitous in our lives. Same, I feel similarly about food, where it's just this thing that we're constantly experiencing and we kind of forget the importance of it at some point. And so kind of being able to consider that and kind of bring that into the cloth through the processing of it, and bringing that reminder of its importance and how significant, and what it allows us to do and how it allows us to feel differently. You know, if you're feeling crappy and you put on that fancy jacket or something, it's just like, no, you know, it's not like I feel crappy with a fancy jacket, but you know, it gives you a little bit of a lift where you're just like, all right, great, you know, I at least look like I feel okay. And that gives me a marginally you know, nicer experience of my day, because I look in the mirror and I think, I love this wild jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in this time of Zoom where we can only see ourselves from like the waist up too, it's like always it's always nice to wear your like best thing or your best necklace or your best something. But a lot of people now working from home. I mean, it's like you've got to find those things too, I think, that make you feel really good, even if you don't see anybody, because textiles can transform the way that you feel. And so, all right. Well, thank you both so much for this. This is like a unique matchup kind of thing that we're doing for Feedback Friday, but I just love having you both in the same place, even though you're blurry. So,
Yeah, I'm so
still love
sorry
you.
about just
Okay. It's kind of great.
Yeah,
It's like it's a high quality blur too.
it's a high
not just
quality
like
blur. Yeah.
Yeah. We can still see all your expression and everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like a
All
low
right.
resolution blur. It's like this really beautiful, like gossamer sort of.
Yeah. It must be the cheesecloth you put in
The
front of
cheesecloth and the
camera
ectoplasm.
lens and the
and the
ectoplasm.
ectoplasm. Let's blame one Amy. It was Amy's ectoplasm.
That's what it is. It's the ectoplasm.
The ectoplasm. All right. So
Gosh.
everybody, let us unmute, say hello, hello. And thank you again, everyone, for attending. Amy, when's our next FF?
It is the week after
Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving, and we have an incredible matchup of, I wish I'd written his last name down, Kathy, you gotta help me, Narayan from the Forbes
Oh,
Pigment
Ryan,
Collection,
hold on. I'll tell you.
and Porfirio Gutierrez, Ecotech Weaver. And just the run through I had, I wished I'd recorded it. The two of them would not stop talking and are coming from such different places with art and pigments and color. And then with this indigenous piece and color and design.
Yeah.
The two of them were just
amazing.
Oh my God, my head.
Yeah,
hurt.
Narayan Kandakar and
Kandakar,
Porfirio Gutierrez. Yeah.
Yes.
We're very excited.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rosalind,
Thank you.
such a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to see you
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. It was
Bye, Amy.
great. Really enjoyed it.
Bye.
All right. Yes, the recording will be online.
Yes,
It will
I
be
will have it
online,
up very
yes.
soon. I'll have it
Yep.
up. Yeah, maybe even today. So you
There
can
you
like
go.
later have your computer on your bed and just listen to this again and close your eyes and listen to
Have
it.
your needle and thread and think
Well, not
about.
with your eyes closed though, Kathy.
No. And no cheesecloth, right?
And no cheesecloth. Yeah. Like keep that in the kitchen. Keep
That's
that for
right.
straining out your raw dye materials.
That's right. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you.
the recording.
Oh yeah.